Today, every country on Earth is drowning in debt. The United States owes over $38 trillion, the highest debt figure in its history. The European Union carries around $14 trillion, and Japan nearly $9 trillion. Even oil-rich nations like Saudi Arabia and export powerhouses like China and Germany are tangled in this web of debt. But here lies a strange paradox. If everyone owes money, who's the creditor? Welcome to Money Decoded. Here, we explore how money, power, and history intertwine. And trust me, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Debt isn't just a burden. It's the hidden architecture of the modern age. Every war, every crisis, every boom we experience today stands upon an invisible scaffolding of debt. And when you trace this chain far enough back, you uncover an unsettling truth. The world doesn't owe money to anyone. It owes it to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. Some build the system, others just pay the price. The idea of national debt wasn't born on Wall Street. It was born in war. The year was 1694. England was at war with France, and its gold reserves were running dry. The king turned to merchants for help. In exchange for a steady stream of interest payments, secured by future tax revenue, they financed the crown. For the first time in history, a state began spending money it didn't yet have. This deal led to the creation of the Bank of England and the world's first government bond. A government's debt was no longer just a liability. It became a tradable investment. France copied the model. The Netherlands refined it. The newly born United States used it to fund its revolution, and later its westward expansion. Debt was no longer a sign of weakness. It became a mark of credibility. If a nation could borrow, it meant the world trusted it. Empires once conquered land to collect gold. Now they issued bonds to collect interest. The battlefield had moved to the balance sheet. Centuries passed, and debt became the world's largest export. Not just America, even Japan carries trillions in obligations. And global debt grows by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country owes, every bank lends. But here's the twist. Everyone is both a borrower and a lender. Because government debt is paid by citizens' taxes, and those same citizens see their retirement funds invested in those very bonds. It's a kind of economic mirror. But in that mirror, it's hard to tell who's real and who's just a reflection. Let's look at the United States. America's debt isn't just America's problem. It's the foundation of the global economy. About half of its $38 trillion is held by investors. 2/3 of them are American: banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The remaining 1/3 sits abroad. Japan holds about $1 trillion. China, $800 billion. So yes, people say America owes China, but that's only around 2% of the total. In reality, America owes itself. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Fed buys them back, creating new dollars in the process. Citizens pay taxes. The interest flows back into their own funds. It's a loop. The debt is real, but the creditor is still part of the same system. This loop isn't just American, it's global. Japan lends to the U.S. through treasuries. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. And developing nations lend back by depositing their reserves in Western bonds. The world is playing a giant IOU game. Every country holds another's promissory note. Every promise is backed by yet another promise. It's like a poker table where everyone's borrowing chips from the next, and no one dares to stand up. Because if one player leaves, the game ends. Above governments stands a greater force, the markets. Funds, central banks, hedge funds, they decide which nations can borrow and which will default. When investors lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall, and entire economies can be rewritten overnight. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. The most powerful institutions today are central banks. They don't just manage debt, they create it. Every time the Federal Reserve or European Central Bank buys bonds, they create new money in exchange. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. There's no such thing as debt-free money. Every dollar represents a debt somewhere in the system. Every bill carries an invisible engraving, IOU. In the 21st century, governments don't aim to pay off debt, they roll it over. They issue new bonds to repay old ones, a process economists call refinancing. Debt is no longer a burden, it's a subscription. Interest is paid, but the principal is never cleared, because the system depends on it. The U.S. will never reach zero debt. Japan's debt exceeds 250% of GDP, yet it keeps selling bonds with near zero yields. Investors aren't waiting for repayment, they're waiting for renewal, because they believe one thing: the cycle will continue. Government bonds today aren't just obligations. They're the safest assets in the global economy. Banks use them as collateral. Pension funds rely on them. Central banks treat them as money. If governments truly paid off their debts, the global financial system would collapse, because debt is the heartbeat of this system. But there's a catch. Not everyone gains equally from this cycle. We say the world owes itself, but interest payments flow upward from workers and taxpayers to the wealthy institutions that hold the debt. Debt isn't just a transfer between nations, it's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality and global indebtedness rise together. Debt is no longer just an economic tool. It functions like the religion of the modern world, sustained by faith and trust. Governments don't pay their debts. They convince us that they will. But when that trust falters, interest rates spike, markets fall, and the world faces the same question again: who can we trust? And perhaps the real answer is this: debt never ends. It merely changes hands. Debt is the greatest illusion of our time, the fuel of infinite growth, and the silent chain that binds us all. If this story made you see the world differently, don't forget to subscribe, because history still asks the same question: who profits and who pays?